brought to you by our great friends at Barrel Theory Beer Company. Keyboard Warriors, our NHL and really anything hot take segment. We got a couple juicy ones here this week, and we'll start with one that actually might have a touch of merit to it. On Russo's show, Worst Seats in the House, which if you guys don't listen, you absolutely should go check it out. But I'd be shocked if you listen to this show and don't listen to that one. But LaPanta points out a pretty interesting stat that we're just going to say he believes that the NHL schedule makers are trying to screw over the Minnesota Wild. You might ask, how is that possible? Since the start of 2023 season, Minnesota Wild have 21 back-to-back games over that span. That's the most in the league. Who has the least? Central Division foe, Winnipeg Jets with 11. And weird, the Wild tend to play the Winnipeg Jets at the tail end of those back-to-backs quite a bit of the time as well. What say you, Joe? Schedule makers have it out for us?
I mean, it's hard to think of being a conspiracy, but their numbers certainly are. There's a disparity there that makes a big difference, right? That many back-to-backs is how many points separate playoff contenders and spots. It does feel like every Winnipeg road game is second of a back-to-back on a Saturday, doesn't it?
Seriously, right?
And then every one of those games, a Wild player gets hurt, like Kirill or whoever, So there should be some more fairness, I think, there. I know it's hard with all the thousands of machinations or making a league schedule.
Totally.
But I think it goes into that as maybe some fairness of it's always going to be a team that gets the most in each year, but maybe they can kind of flip flop each year or whatever, because especially if it's division teams and that's the format in playoffs is 1, 2, 3 in your division, all of a sudden you get a home game, home ice advantage versus not. So I would think that the league has a lot bigger things to do than to screw over the Wild and stuff like that. And maybe there's other teams that they would what do they do to Chicago ever? What do they do to the sweetheart teams?
They give them more Winter Classics.
So and that's a whole other thing in itself. But yeah, I think there should be a more, there should be more equity there as far as back-to-backs, because they do those things. They do make a difference down the line, because those are very hard to deal with in multiple fashion.
Yeah, for sure. And LaPanta points out too, obviously there's things that are out of their control when you've got shared venues between hockey and basketball, you got concerts, other events, whatever, but it's just a discrepancy within division, like you said, right? It's okay if the teams on the East have way more back-to-backs because there's, way easier travel, or, hey, if you want all the Central Division to be hammered with back-to-backs, fine, that balances it. It's just tough when that does make a big difference on the team's performance, and you're seeing a big discrepancy there over a year and a half span for the Wild versus Central Division foes. But we'll see. Maybe this is all we needed. Throw it out into the universe, and next year the Wild will have 2 back-to-backs. This next one from your boy Greg Wyshynski is a juicy one. Basically said on a holiday episode with Jeff Merrick on the sheet, says that Kyle Dubas, when brought in by Fenway Sports Group, had to have some kind of mandate to sell them on why, he had a 7-year vision, because they gave him a ridiculous 7-year contract, which is not normal. And the vision is, hey, the team's going to get bad. It's going to bottom out. And guess what happens to the Pittsburgh Penguins every time they bottom out? They get handed on a silver platter a generational star. Mario Lemieux, Sidney Crosby. Do we think that the Penguins are going to downward spiral fast enough so that next year they can pick up one Canadian, Mr. McKenna?
I don't know if they'll be loaded a downturn that bad to get that, to that pick. I don't think, unless they get a lucky in the lottery. And they're not going to be.
We need another lockout, and we need everyone to be in equally, and we need the Anaheim Ducks to get the second overall pick and be upset.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think, or the Red Wings all of a sudden get a top 3 pick, which they haven't gotten, in their longer rebuild. So, yeah, no question, that's going to be, I don't know if there's any other Sidney Crosbys or Flurries out there, or Malkins out there in these next couple of drafts. I mean, there's some really highly touted players, but you know, I think all these guys that have come before them, like the Matthews and the Eichels and the Bedards, and Celebrini's turning into a stud, you know. So I'm not sure the guys coming are going to be that good, but again, it takes a lot of luck and the right timing for that luck for it to happen, and it did certainly for them, and it did for Tampa Bay when they got Stamkos and they got Hedman in back-to-back years.
Yeah, that is a fact. And we'll go right off of that one, Joe. This this really isn't a hot take, but we've got to at least address it. Steve Yzerman just made his last coaching hire.
Oh man.
I mean, he's got the faith and belief of the fans, right? Like he is an icon in Detroit. He's got the track record with what he built in Tampa, but you only get so many coaching hires as GM historically. Am I crazy here?
No, you're not crazy, and you know that's what I thought. I think when Bill Guerin hired John Hines, like I thought, okay, maybe he had a few coaches, and like this was the one. And I know the Wild have a 5-year plan, and so I think his contract, you know, goes quite a ways. But yeah, I mean, Yzerman, I grew up in Detroit, and he's a legend there. He's a god there, and they're going to give him as much patience as they can. But I think you're starting to see a little more unrest now, just because of feeling like they got teased last year, getting close to a playoff spot, and then all of a sudden kind of really downturning this year to firing Derek Lalonde. So I think there is, if you would have told me that a few years ago, I probably would disagree. But I think considering where they are now, if Todd McClellan ends up getting fired, you know, in 2+ years, that means things have really got stagnant or worse. So yeah, and you have to wonder how long Yzerman wants to play this out. You know, I know he's very prideful and you know, ambitious and everything, and so I don't think he wants to leave without bringing them back to the playoffs and doing that. It'd be hard for him to do it. Not that his legacy would be crazy tarnished, but I think he has a lot of pride in that uniform. So, but yeah, eventually, you know, the patience is going to run out there. You know, rebuilds are supposed to take anywhere between like 4 and 15 years, whatever that. But most people don't get a chance to see their way through it. You know, not a lot of GMs get the way to see it through it.
That's the tough thing too, is like last year they got a little taste. You bring in big names like DeBrincat and Kane, and to see the downward spiral they've been on this year, it's tough to swallow. But I do think McClellan could certainly make a difference. I still think there's big flaws in the roster, but it could be enough to get him over the hump and at least be relevant. And they got a stud on the way, one that I very much thought my Pittsburgh Penguins were going to take. They opted for Braden Yeager, who has since become Rutger McGroarty. But Axel Sandin Pellikka, this guy, what he's doing in World Juniors, like he currently outplaying even Zeev Buium as the top player probably in the entire tournament, which is nuts for a defenseman. Maybe that's the only jolt they need at the end of his contract overseas. But it's going to be really interesting to see how the next year and a half plays out for Detroit to decide, are they going to just do a full regime flip, or do they think they've righted the ship?
Yeah, it's hard to see them letting Yzerman go. I think they're going to have some more patience. But what surprised me more is like the fact that some of the free agent decisions that he's made have been not great ones, right? And so it's one thing to believe in your core. I think they do have a pretty good core there with Larkin and Seider and Lucas Raymond, and like you mentioned, some prospects coming and stuff like that. But you got to find the right support players, and the ones that some of the free agent signings like the Tarasenko's and everything of the world haven't turned out the way they needed to. And so aside from David Perron, who was pretty good for them, but like a lot of the guys have been kind of misses there. And Wallman, they traded and gave away picks to get away, you know, so, you know, he hasn't batted 100. So we'll see what happens there.
For sure. And last one here, Joe, this one, bit more of a stretch. You probably will smack me in the nose for it, but Fanatics. How Fanatics stole Christmas. I'm convinced at this point that they have to be intentionally messing up some of this gear just so that people will talk about them and they will be in like the news cycle on socials, because there's no way that you can mess up this much gear this badly, especially like around Christmas time. It's insane how they keep on messing up people's apparel. It's nuts.
What is the old saying? Like, the no such thing as bad publicity, I guess. But
someone took that way too seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I know they have contracts and stuff, and so they have the ability to, still run these things out. But definitely not people's favorites as far as the apparel companies for all these different places. So,
and people are still buying from them somehow. Like maybe word hasn't gotten around enough, but like there was the first one I saw was a Wild like crew neck where the Wild logo's upside down on the chest. I've seen players where the numbers got switched around. I've seen players where the numbers are completely wrong. I've seen names spelled wrong. There was even one, I think the funniest one was, it was an Eagles. I might have this backwards. I think it was a Detroit jersey, NFL, really? Detroit Lions. And where it's usually says Lions, like that little right in the chest, it said Eagles. And maybe it was the other way around. Maybe it was an Eagles jersey that said Lions in small print there, like right in the little V. But like, how do you mess that? Like, that's an intentional, egregious error.
Yeah, I mean, and that's on a massive amount of jerseys, So, yeah, I'm old school with some of the old apparel companies and ones. Like, I grew up in Michigan fan, and so like Nike did all the Wolverine stuff, So. But Fanatics hasn't really grown a lot of people yet.
So. Bring back Starter.
Oh, old school.
I'll fix everything.
Who did the Triple Fat Goose jackets? Was that Starter? The Triple Fat Goose winter jackets? I don't know if they're big in Minnesota or not. But
Goose. Now I gotta look that up.
Yeah, like the very warm, puffy like sports jackets.
There's literally a website called triplefatgoose.com. Premium goose down jackets. So maybe that's just what it was. Triple fat goose.
You could probably order them still. So, but yeah, be perfect for Minnesota.
I have to dabble on that more. But yeah, just crazy to me. But all right, there's a smattering of hot takes across this night. We don't even have to give it any credence, but I was even going to say, like, Zeev Boyum's just going to get all of the NIL money thrown at him to stay for one more year after Denver getting decimated by UNLV, but it's not happening. He's leaving as soon as the season's over. We all know it.
Yeah.
I did think it was interesting, though, that Russo is pretty confident Stramo will be going back for his senior year.
I think that's kind of the plan for right now. Like, I mean, if there's not really any rush, and like the key is for what's better for him playing there or playing in Iowa, I don't know.
I like him going back there personally.
Yeah. I don't know. He can develop. They have a really good program. They have really good coaching. Like, you play high leverage situations. You play less games, of course, but I think it's I think for his development, give another year there. If he was blowing people away the first couple of years and like all of a sudden, hey, he's ready to go, but they still have to sign him, right? Entry level deal. So
yeah.
Give it some time.